Alright guys, welcome back to Tony the Technician's channel, and today we will be moving on to Tool Talk episode 5, which I will be covering sockets, extensions, specialty adapters, 6-point, 12-point, deep well, shallow, impact versus non-impact, the extensions, different features, lengths, quality. I'll also go over a couple different rail systems for people that like to keep their sockets in their cases, which isn't bad, or if you get rails, the different types of rail systems out there, as well as spline drive and things like that. So first, I'll probably go over the extensions and the differences and everything, and then we'll move on to sockets and features and why we need so many different ones, as well as like a pass-through socket set and things like that. So let's get into it. Should be a good one. Let me know what you guys think. Alright, so first off, we're going to start off with extensions and why we need so many different ones. First off, you have your 3/8 drive, which is your most common. So like I always say, if you can only afford so much and you're starting out, make sure you start out with 3/8 drive. That is going to be your most commonly used ratchet, extensions, and sockets. So just remember that. We are going to start off with 1/4-inch drive though. When looking at extensions, you're going to need multiple different lengths. You can have too many, but basically you can never have too many extensions. I do not have anything that's like 24 or 36 or anything extremely long, but I do have enough extensions to make a long extension. But first off, we're going to look at the 1/4-inch drive, which you see I have quite a different few lengths. Some are the same, but they have different features. Like this came out of my Stanley set, the very first tool set I ever bought about 9 years ago. It's an okay extension. It's about 8 inches long, but the reason I don't use this one all that often is because it doesn't have these markings in it. And the reason for these is when you break a nut or a bolt loose, most of the time you're going to be oily, and it's really hard to get down there and turn this shaft or extension when you're oily. There's nothing to grip. So that's why they've engraved these markings into here, in order for you to get a grip on it and be able to turn it with your hand. First, you have about a 2-inch extension. This is a wobble extension. It comes in handy when you don't necessarily need a universal joint to make an extreme turn, but when you just need the socket to just move a little bit, these wobble extensions come in handy. Then you just have your normal extensions. This one's a 3-inch. Then you have a 5. And then these are roughly 8 inches and a 12-inch extension. They are different brands. This one is DeWalt. I have a lot of DeWalt extensions. The wobble head ones that I do have are just the Pittsburgh, but they do work just fine. And so that's basically it for the 1/4-inch drive. Now for the 3/8 drive, you see I have quite a bit of different ones. This is also the Stanley one. As you can tell, there's no grip on it. So those ones I don't use all that often. So when looking for extensions, you might want to look for something with a grip on it, because that comes in handy. Another thing that I have are locking extensions. These basically just hold the socket on and it won't release it unless you pull this. So that can come in handy a lot as well. It is also got the engravings on here for a grip as well. And then this is the wobble head. And then you see these black extensions here. These are actually impact extensions. Now I will go into why you need to use impact extensions when using an impact. But for right now, I'll just show them to you. This is a 6-inch extension. This is a 3. Then I have a 1-inch wobble, a couple 6-inch regular wobble, regular 12-inch, a locking, and a wobble. If you're just starting out, you can start out with just trying to find a good normal set of extensions with the grip, and then maybe move on to the locking and wobble. And then for the 1/2 inch drive, just have the short one, a couple 6-inch, the wobble, and then the 12-inch normal and wobble. I do not have a locking one. The only locking ones I have are for the 3/8 drive because those are my most common used extensions. Then moving into why they have special impact extensions and adapters. This is for my 1/4-inch impact. All the different adapters there, also locking. This is made by Clutch. I believe it ran about $10 for the 3. This is just a cheap Pittsburgh set. And the reason I'm covering why it's important to have impact adapters and extensions are because a while back I made the mistake of using a normal grade adapter on an impact, and it actually just took the shaft and twisted it, because you have a lot more torque when using an impact than when just using a ratchet. So you never want to use a regular adapter or extension on an impact because you're using a lot more torque, and the regular extensions and adapters are not made for that high of torque. All of the impact grade extensions, adapters, sockets have been heat treated and are made specifically for high impact, as well as the impact sockets. They are heat treated and they actually have a thicker wall than normal impact or normal sockets. So that is one of the reasons that you always want to use impact grade stuff when using an impact. Now you can use impact sockets and adapters on a regular ratchet. That is no problem. You just need to be aware that most impact sockets, the walls are thicker than normal sockets. So if you're in a tight space, they might not work. But other than that, you have no worries about damaging a regular impact socket while using it on a ratchet. But never use a regular adapter or anything on an impact. So now that we're done with extensions, these are just what I have laid out for you. I do have more. And this is just a 1/4-inch and 3/8 set where you can tell it comes with 3 spark plug sockets, some adapters, some universal joints, and more adapters. So that's a good set. I believe that runs about $30, and it's no hassle, lifetime warranty. So if you're looking at an extension set and you're not buying a toolkit, or if you are and it only comes with a couple of extensions or adapters, this is a good purchase. Okay, so now that I've covered extensions and kind of the differences and features in those, and why I prefer to have these grips, you also, just like sockets, you can look at the engravings, just like how it's not as big of a deal on extensions because it's not an actual socket size, but like how on this, it is just like a painted on size. A lot of people like to have good engravings, but I'll get to that where it's a little bit more important, such as impact sockets and regular sockets. But moving on to kind of some adapters. So like I stated before, you never want to use a regular grade adapter or socket on an impact. This is just a 3/8 to 1/4-inch adapter. It is made by DeWalt. A lot of my stuff that I do have in normal sockets are DeWalt, and I have 0 issues with them. This is a 1/4-inch to 3/8 adapter and a 1/2-inch to 3/8 adapter. Now for the impact set, I do have a 3/8 to 1/2-inch, which I do not have in normal. But like I stated before, you can use impact grade adapters and sockets as a normal socket or adapter, just not the other way around. So as you can see, 3/8 to 1/2-inch, 3/8 to 1/4, 1/4 to 3/8, and 1/2 to 3/8. And then these are extremely handy for impact if you have a 1/4-inch impact, and this holds onto your socket and doesn't, let it just fall off. So I got the set of 3. I believe it was like around $10 for all 3. And those are these are some things you might want to purchase first, and then if you do have an impact, maybe some adapters later on. Let me get into these, because one of the sockets I am going to cover is a universal joint socket, whereas most people, when you order a socket set, if you don't buy through Snap-on or Matco, where you just get rails and stuff like that, if you just buy, like, let's say a Stanley or, any just case of sockets or a socket set, you're most likely going to get a universal joint socket adapter, which these do come in handy. They're extremely handy, and if you need to get somewhere and you don't want it moving around so much, you can just simply run a piece of electrical tape around it and it will stiffen it up. But these are extremely useful, because the difference is between having a universal joint socket compared to an adapter. These are both 15s 3/8 drive. Now you can see how much more space it takes when using an adapter instead of just a socket. Now, when you're just first starting out, these will work just fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but you might run, if you do a lot of work, you might run into a situation where this is just too big to get in somewhere, whereas this comes in handy. You can also get these in a deeper setting, but if you're going to do that, it's just as easy to just use a universal joint adapter and just put a deep well on there. But that is the difference in between actually purchasing a universal joint socket and just the adapter. You save yourself some room when purchasing these. A set of metric, I believe, cost me about $40. Here is a standard set. It was a set of 7, and then the metric set is a set of 10, and it ran around $40. If you go up to Snap-on and Matco and Cornwell, they do get more expensive, but you also get a higher quality. But with Gear Wrench, I really like the quality and the warranties, so that's why I stuck with these, especially for home use. It's not as, I shouldn't say important, but I'm not in a situation where I'm too worried about breaking something while I'm at home. So moving on from the universal joint adapters, let's kind of get into the difference in between 6 and 12-point sockets. So with the 6-point, this is a cheap Stanley socket, of course, from that first toolkit that I ever owned. And it is a 6-point, and here's a 12-point. Now, there's pros and cons to each, and I will go over that now. With a 6-point, you get a lot better coverage over the nut or bolt, as to where on a 6-point socket or a 12-point socket, you're not going to have quite the coverage on the head bolt or the bolt head or the nut. Now, you can get your ratchet or wrench in many more positions, especially if you're in a tight space when using a 12-point, because you can get them on there at many different angles compared to a 6-point. But the torque is, you have a lot stronger torque rating on a 6-point than you do on a 12-point, where a 12-point might round off the head of a bolt. You also have them impact grade as well, 6-point and 12-point. Now, another thing where you really need a 12-point, it's rare, but sometimes you will run across having a bolt or a nut that is actually a 12-point instead of a 6-point, so you can't necessarily use a 6-point. You need to use a 12-point socket. Somewhere where I ran into that is when I was building my engine. I had to order a new bolt kit for my oil pan because my 6-point ran into the side of my oil pan. So I had to order a new bolt kit, and it does happen that they are all 12 points. So luckily, I found a 12-point that I had laying around that did fit, because obviously my 6-point sockets would not work. So you might run into the situation where you actually need a 12-point. Now, like I was stating, impact sockets are made to withstand a lot more torque than a normal socket. As you can tell, they are not that you can tell, they are heat treated, but as you can tell, the walls on an impact socket are quite a bit thicker than what you have on a normal socket, and that increases its strength by quite a bit. Another thing you want to look at when buying sockets is you need to determine, are you going to need both shallow and deep well, or what you should start out with. Is most likely when you're buying a socket set, you want to look for something with both shallow and deep. It will cost you more if you buy them separately. So that's something you might want to look for. Now, I will also be going over quality of these, and I'll be going over the grades and everything like that. Let me get this cleaned up, and we will start into going over that. Okay, so first we're going to start off by going over your regular sockets, and then we'll move into the impact sockets. When purchasing a socket set, you do primarily want to focus on 3/8 drive if you're buying only so much at a time. 3/8 is going to be your most common size. You want to focus on getting 6 points primarily, and then 12 points do come in handy every once in a while. So maybe after you've got your 6 points, then maybe focus on getting 12-point sockets. But another thing you want to look at is the detent in the bottom of the socket, and that is what's actually going to hold your socket onto your ratchet, whereas impact sockets, most of them do not have just detents around the bottom. It will have the hole in the side, and that's where the pin on your impact is actually going to hold the socket on. Some sockets are made without these. It's rare, but some people have purchased them, and then they have a problem with their socket staying on their ratchet. But besides that, let's go over how brands and quality and everything differ in these sockets. So starting off, this is a Stanley socket. The engravings are very light. They aren't etched very deep into the socket, so they are hard to see. But I didn't have a problem with these sockets when I used them. They weren't that terrible. I never broke anything, but I also wasn't doing any major jobs. They were very simple jobs. So I'm not quite sure how a Stanley socket would hold up in the professional automotive business. This is a 6-point. You have your detent, but just light engraving. And with a cheaper set, you are going to have a little more play on the bolt. They're not going to be quite as accurate as a more expensive socket. So that's something you have to worry about when purchasing a cheaper socket set. The 12-point, this is a Pittsburgh from Harbor Freight. Now, the engravings on these are actually pretty good. They're etched in pretty deep, easy to read, and everything. But one of the things I also focus on when buying a socket set is the etching in the bottom, because when I break a bolt loose, most of the time it's a lot faster for me to spin the socket than it is to sit there and spin the ratchet, especially when you're in a tight spot. So these engravings in the bottom are something I really look for in sockets. Back to this is a 12-point, so you will not get quite the grip on a head or a bolt or a nut that you would with a 6-point. But then again, remember, there are 12-point sockets out there, or nuts and bolts. And then this is the DeWalt 3/8 drive. These are all 15s. And the etching in this socket is very nice. It is also deep. I love the DeWalt sockets. I've had zero problems with them, and I've actually used those quite a bit. Then this is the Matco Silver Eagle. It is a little harder to read, the Silver Eagle part. It's not etched in quite as deep, but the actual size of the socket is etched pretty well, and it is a very nice socket. I have basically every size in the Matco Silver Eagle, and I've had zero problems with those as well. And then you get to warranty. I'm not sure about Stanley's warranty. I don't think they have them. I mean, you're looking at paying $60 for an entire socket set, so they are really cheap. The Pittsburgh obviously does have lifetime warranty, just like most of Harbor Freight's products. But if you're running into an issue of breaking sockets all the time, and granted you do have lifetime warranty on these, so you can go back and replace them, but if you're running into the issue of breaking them all the time, you might just want to spend the little extra money and step up a grade. Just like DeWalt, they're a much nicer socket, and you also have a no hassle lifetime warranty on these. So that's why I really like the DeWalt sockets. I haven't had an issue with those. Now, they aren't that expensive either. I got a set of almost 200 sockets for about $200. But then stepping up in quality, you have Silver Eagle made by Matco, and it is a little bit more expensive, especially if you get into the bigger sockets and everything. But you are getting a much better quality and a good warranty as well. Now, as you can see, if you look at these sockets, they're roughly about the same size, but you can tell there are minor differences in the height, quality of the chrome jobs, and etching. But this is basically from lowest quality to highest quality. I don't have Snap-on here. One thing you really want to look at when buying sockets is just the warranty and quality. But if you're on a budget, get what you can afford. Don't put yourself in debt trying to look good for other people. You can get the job done with any socket. It might just not be as easy, and you really need to think about 6 and 12 point sockets. It's very important. Then you have your deep wells as well. This is a DeWalt 15 millimeter. Like I said before, it has good etching and engraving. And here is a Matco Silver Eagle. It is nice etching as well, and overall a great socket. You can tell the depths are different in the sockets, but they both are deep well. But in these, you can tell it is quite a big difference in DeWalt's deep well versus Matco's deep well. So that's one thing you want to look at when getting deep wells. And then like Snap-on and Matco and Gear Wrench and all these companies, they also make mid-length sockets, which is in between deep well and shallow. Now, you won't run across needing them all that often. They are nice to use, but when you actually run into a situation that would need a mid-length socket, it's not that often. But say you're in a tight space, and like if there's a bolt head here and you can't get, there's a stud on it and you can't get to it with a normal shallow socket, and you have a deep well socket that you obviously can't get in there, that's where a mid-length socket really comes in handy, because you would be able to get it in there and over this stud as well to get to that nut. So that's where the differences are in between shallow and deep. And then like I showed you before, you have your universal joints, which can come in handy. This is made by Gear Wrench. I showed you the sets that I have in the toolbox. They're also nicely engraved. Has the part number there, and I've had zero problems with those. Now, when purchasing impact sockets, you are gonna be seeing a little bit higher price, but that's because they're made a lot stronger. This is a Gear Wrench. This is a Matco. This is a Gear Wrench shallow and a Matco shallow, and then you also have your swivel head Matco impact socket as well. So when looking at these, this is a 6-point. This is one of my 12 points. And gear wrench, the job on this is pretty decent, but some of their sockets do have a bad coat on them, whereas this one is very faint, and some of them are even worse than this. But they do have it engraved in the back, and I also have it on a rail system to where I don't necessarily need to look at the socket. I can just grab what's on the rail. But when purchasing impact sockets, you want to see if not only is it, I don't know if you want to call this painted on or etched on or whatever, but you need to look and see how well it's on there, and then make sure that it has it actually engraved into it as well. So I've already went over the differences in 6 and 12 point, so you're still looking at the same things when looking at impact sockets. This swivel head impact socket is also a 12 point, and here's a 6-point Matco. They are a little bit thicker than my gear wrench ones, but the gear wrench impact sockets I do just keep at home because I don't do a terribly lot of work, but they do a great job for what I do here in my garage. Whereas the Matco and everything I have in my box at school, and that's where we run into working on a lot more stuff. But impact sockets are going to run you in the hundreds of dollars, and you really want to look at a good set of impact sockets. Just like you can get a Pittsburgh set, but a lot of people do break their impact sockets, but it's not a huge deal because you can get them replaced. But when I buy an impact socket, I want something that's going to last as well as have that lifetime warranty. So that's why I have gear wrench and Matco. So moving on, I kind of want to show you an example of why you will need both shallow and deep well sockets. So when you have just a bolt, let's say this is a head bolt, and you don't need a deep well socket to get to it. You can easily get over the head of a bolt with a shallow socket. Now, where you run into the problem of shallow sockets when you have, say, a nut on a stud, this is just a oil sending unit that I'm using as an example. When you have a normal socket, you can see the bolt hits the ratchet drive before you can get the socket on the actual nut to loosen it. And that is where a deep well socket comes in handy. I'm sorry, you guys, I don't have a tripod yet. I have one on order, so hopefully my videos will be a little bit better. I'll be able to display things for you a little bit better. But this is where a deep well socket comes in handy, because you can get enough depth to where the bolt is inside the socket, but you can still get the socket over the nut. So that is why we use deep well sockets, and it's best to look for a socket set with both deep and shallow sockets. Now, moving on from speaking about shallow and deep well, another socket that you will be using are spark plug sockets. Now, the most common size is 5/8 for a spark plug, but when getting spark plug sockets, you will most likely get the most common 3 sizes, where I will show you. I just have this one out for display, but you also have a 3/4 and an 11/16, just like when you buy this DeWalt extension set, you also get all 3 sizes. Now, spark plug sockets, they are designed with a rubber grommet on the inside in order to hold the ceramic part of the spark plug once you get it unthreaded and pull it out, so you don't end up dropping it, cracking the ceramic, getting ceramic down into the cylinder and everything like that. So they are specifically designed to hold spark plugs. And they're also going to have this on the end to where you can get a wrench on there if need be. I also have some specialty spark plug sockets that don't have the rubber grommet, but it is magnetic, and the magnet on these are extremely strong. You also get all three sizes with different length extensions. This set runs, what was it, around $50 with the discount, I believe. But basically you have this magnet that is sealed inside of the socket that actually really holds on to that spark plug. So this is an amazing set. I just recently got it, but that is a different style of spark plug socket. Just starting out, or even if you're a professional technician and still been doing the job for many years, there's no problem with just using these. These are still fantastic spark plug sockets. Now, another thing I want to go over is a pass-through socket set. This is just a cheap Pittsburgh one, but I've used it quite a bit and I have zero complaints about it. What's nice is, say you have a deep well socket, but the bolt is still too long for your deep well socket to get to that nut. Let's say, here's the block and the nut is up against it, but you have a bolt shaft that sticks out too far and you can't necessarily get to that bolt head. That is where a pass-through set comes in handy, because the sockets are designed to go in to a ratchet that is specifically designed for letting the shafts pass through it. So as you can see, the bolt can pass completely through the ratchet, as where a normal ratchet, you can't do that. So you can get on a lot deeper studs and stuff like that with a pass-through socket set. Now, what is also nice is, say you can't get enough torque on something with this ratchet. Now, I wouldn't trust putting a pipe over the end of this, because I'm pretty sure the metal shaft only goes down about an inch. And if you put it over there, you're likely to break the handle off. Something that's really nice about this set is you can basically grab any 3/4 drive wrench. You could use a normal 12-point non-rationing wrench, or like my Easy Red. This can still be adapted to any 3/4 ratcheting wrench or regular wrench, and you still have the feature of the ratchet. And plus, this is a much longer wrench than this ratchet, so you can get a lot more torque on it. So any of these sockets will fit in any 3/4 wrench or ratcheting wrench or anything like that. So that is one nice thing about the pass-through set. Some pass-through socket sets are different. They don't have the same type of end, so I'm not sure if the gear wrench one works the same or anything like that, but I've had zero issues with this. So if you're just beginning, this is a great purchase. It's really cheap, lifetime warranty. I've had zero issues with it, so that's something to look at. Okay, so now the last thing I kind of want to go over are rail systems. And if you're just starting off, say you're a do-it-yourselfer or a beginner, you might just purchase yourself a set like this. This is that, I think it was a 194-piece DeWalt set. I also have this Stanley box, but it's somewhere else and pretty beat up. If you're just starting out, these do work. Say you don't have a toolbox, you can keep your all the tools that come in here in this case. Obviously, this is a really nice case. It holds all of the sockets very well. Nothing would fall out. Everything was kind of clamped in. So this was very nice, and this is okay to keep your sockets and ratchets and extensions in. But say you have a toolbox. If you have a large enough toolbox and you don't mind keeping this, you can open this up like this and keep it in a drawer. But this is a pretty large case, and it does take up quite a bit of room. So even though I have OCD and I love to keep things organized, this wasn't quite in my plan. So I didn't end up keeping all the sockets and everything in here. So that's why I'm going to be going into different types of rail systems and everything you can look into once you move on from a socket set to a larger toolbox, or it doesn't matter what size of toolbox. So starting off, if you've moved all your sockets and stuff out of here, or you've just bought socket rails, like you can pick these up for $10 a dozen. These cheap little metal rails that kind of hold the sockets on here, but they're kind of a pain in the butt, and they're really cheap. But if that's what you can afford, and for this tiny cheap toolbox, I thought they were fantastic. I wasn't going to put anything expensive in here anyways, so that's what I have in here. You can look at these. They come in both 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch drive, so they can hold all your sockets. And then when purchasing, say you just buy sockets by themselves, just like this, you might get sockets on a rail. And I did keep them on here because these are kind of a specialty socket. So I didn't put them on my other rails. But another rail system you can look into is the Ernst Socket Boss. They are a little bit more expensive. It's a rail system of 3. Comes with 3 rails, and they're in a tray, so you can lock them in. But say you need to go somewhere with just certain sockets, you can pull this entire rail out and go do your job. Or when you're done, drop it back in here, click it in, and it's locked in place. Another thing that's nice about this Socket Boss is everything is locking. In order to get them out, it is the twist lock. It comes with all the little stickers you need in order to mark your sockets. They do run about $25 per set though, per set of 3 rails. Each rail will have 15 1/4 inch adapters, 15 3/8, and 15 1/2 inch. Now I obviously removed those. You can also buy packs of 15 of whatever size you need. So I have a lot of 1/4 inch drive up front, so I took the 1/4 inch drive off the other sets and moved them to the first rail. So I have all my 1/4 inch drive up front. These 2 are 3/8, and so I have those there. These are my 3/8 impacts, my 1/2 inch shallow impacts. So that's how I use these. And then you also have this rail system, which is pretty nice. It is the Harbor Freight version, but I like them better than, say, the very similar products where you have the plastic shaft that comes up quite a bit. But the thing I don't like about those are, for one, it's harder to get the socket on, and it's very likely that you're going to break that little plastic shaft. These are just little stubs, not very tall, nice and thick. You're not going to break these, and they hold the socket very well. They are not locking, but it's a very nice rail for a really good price. I think you get a 1/4 inch drive, 3/8 drive, and 1/2 inch drive for both metric and standard. So you get 6 rail systems for, I think it's like $10. So it's really good. And the thing I like about these is, even though you can't really take it out like you can the Socket Boss, it doesn't take up a lot of room. This holds a lot of sockets in a very small space. It's not very wide. And the reason I did this is because when I put my 1/2 inch sockets on the Socket Boss, the drawer that I have them in isn't quite deep enough. It would hold the sockets up too high, and I wouldn't be able to shut my drawer. So that's why I went with this. It's a little shallower, takes up a little bit smaller room, and it's cheaper. So if you're looking for a good budget rail system, I have no complaints about the Harbor Freight one, just like this. So these are a little bit more expensive, but they have many more features, and they're my favorite. So I've shown you a couple different ones, the standalone rails that you get with some of the purchases of sockets. Then you have your Ernst Socket Boss and your Harbor Freight socket rail, as well as the metal rails. Those are just some of the many different brands of socket rails out there. Obviously, you can tell I keep some stuff in their cases depending on how nice the cases are. As you can see, here's another couple standalone rails, a metal one and a plastic one. The thing that's nice about these are you can keep adding adapters to fit more and more sockets, as where these type you cannot. It's just whatever's there is there. But besides the rails, I did only show you basically 3/8 drive sockets and everything. So let me just go ahead and show you. Here are all my 1/4" shallow and deep well, as well as those universal joints that I showed you. Here's some Allen head sockets, as well as 3/8 shallow, 3/8 deep well, spark plug sockets, 3/8 impact, 1/2" impact, and 1/2" drive normal sockets. Most of these are DeWalt, but I do have one. This is power built. It's the only one that I could find in that size. Everything else I have are Craftsman. Well, they're all DeWalt except for these two are Craftsman. This one is power built. Same thing for up here. These are all DeWalt except for this is Craftsman. And which one? I think it was this 25. I couldn't find it in Craftsman or anything but this Colombian brand. And it was a decent price, and it's a decent socket. Obviously, I'm not going to be using that size. You don't come across using that size all that often. And I thought they were just sending me one, but they actually sent me two, so it wasn't terrible. Got a couple Craftsman over here. But those are just some differences in sockets, socket rails, and everything. If you guys want to know more, please let me know, and I will do a video on that. Okay guys, so that's basically it. Sorry, my mind was all over the place for that video. I was showing you one thing and I was trying to think ahead of what I was going to show you or tell you next. So if it seemed like I jumped around quite a bit, I'm sorry. But I just wanted to go over different sockets: shallow, mid-length, deep, 12-point, 6-point, going over the detent pin or the detent marks in the bottom of the socket, different brands, warranties, price ranges. Obviously, sockets can go from really cheap to very, very expensive. So whatever you can afford, that's what you should get. Don't go putting yourself in debt trying to get yourself a lot of sockets. Make sure the engravings and everything are nice. You don't just want the painted on number, because if that rubs off, you will be stuck guessing what size it is. So make sure it has both. The universal joint sockets, I went over those, the differences in between the universal joint socket and the universal joint adapter. I went over some different extensions, locking, regular, and wobble, as well as looking for those etchings for a grip. And then I also stated never use normal sockets or extensions or adapters on an impact, because they are not rated for that torque. But it is okay to use an impact socket or adapter or extension on a regular ratchet. Went over the different rails. If you guys have a rail system that you guys like and you want to share it with others, please drop them in the comments, as well as some of your favorite sockets and stuff like that. What I'll be going over next in my next tool talk video is probably going to be, I guess you would call them specialty sockets, something like that. Basically, I'm going to be going over the different types of sockets, not normal sockets, but you got your bit sockets like Allen head, Torx, triple squares, inverted sockets, or your e-Torx sockets and stuff like that. I'll be going over different sets and how much they cost and the quality of them, because I do have some cheaper extra long bit sockets, and then I have a good set of gear wrench as well as Matco Silver Eagle set, and I'll go over the differences in quality and why they actually come in handy and why you need different lengths. Now, it's not necessarily necessary if you're just a do-it-yourselfer and beginner. You won't need as many as I have, but if you are a professional technician, you know how many different sockets and types of sockets that we use. Or if you're a beginning, or if you're just coming into the field of becoming a technician, you'll start to understand why we have so many different ones. But that's it, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry this video is kind of all over the place, but I'm trying to get better. If you guys have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't. Thank you guys once again for watching Tony the Technician's channel, and I'll see you guys next time.